Hey kids, how you doing today? Uh, as we take a look at today's article, we're getting to the official beginning of World War II. Now we know that there's been fighting going on kind of all over the world. It started in Manchuria in 1931, which is a part of China. Japan invaded there. The Italians invaded Ethiopia and Africa in 1935. You've had Hitler bullying his way into taking various territory without firing a shot. You've got Spain with their civil war that kind of everybody is sort of jumping into. And you've got the Soviet Union fighting against Finland after kind of already grabbing Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia from from their independence and forcibly adding them back into the Soviet Union. So there's been a lot of fighting. But the official start of World War II is when Germany invades Poland, September 1st, 1939. Uh, it's kind of there had been the Munich Agreement, and then Hitler went back on that promise. So finally, the British and French, after kind of ignoring what had been going on for so long, hoping that they wouldn't have to go to war, they finally say, if you invade Poland, there will be war, and he did it anyway, and so they declared war. They didn't do much else, but they declared war. So let's take a look at the article here, and please follow along while I read. Okay, World War II Blitzkrieg, 1939, 1940, Poland and the Phony War, 1 minute to midnight. After Germany took the Rhineland and Austria without firing a shot, Hitler turned his attention toward Czechoslovakia. The western part of Czechoslovakia was a German-speaking area known as the Sudetenland. Hitler demanded that the Sudetenland be annexed into Germany. Britain and France met with Germany in the city of Munich to try to solve the crisis. Britain took the lead and followed a policy of appeasement. The British Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, was willing to give Hitler the Sudetenland as long as he would promise not to make any further demands. Adolf Hitler had no respect for democracy or compromise. He willingly agreed to the deal, but never intended to keep his promise. The Czechs were devastated at being sold out by their allies. They knew Hitler would not stop at the Sudetenland. 6 months later, Germany took the rest of Czechoslovakia. The Allies did nothing. Shortly after taking Czechoslovakia, Hitler began to threaten Germany's other eastern neighbor, Poland. The British and French made it clear that there would be war if Germany attempted to take Poland. Hitler cared little for the threat. He doubted the Allies would actually do anything. Even if they wanted to act, Poland was in Eastern Europe, far away from any British or French troops. Meanwhile, Germany and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact, assuring the Soviets would not come to the aid of Poland when the Germans invaded. The idea of Germany and the Soviet Union cooperating was unthinkable before 1939. For years, the two nations were hostile to each other. One of the reasons Hitler gained power in Germany was ordinary Germans were afraid of a Soviet-style revolution occurring in Germany. The Nazis offered an alternative to the German Communist Party. After taking power, Hitler rounded up and executed most German communists. In the Soviet Union, Stalin was viciously anti-German. Thousands of Soviet officers were executed for treason in the 1930s on the charge that they were spies for Germany. In 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union became friendly almost overnight, and that spelled doom for Poland. There you see that political cartoon of Hitler and Stalin kind of walking along arm in arm, but they've got pistols behind their back just in case. Everyone knew at the time that they hated each other's guts, but they wanted to stomp on some little countries that were between them, so they kind of divided them up, decided who would get what, and neither side would interfere with the other. The first flash of lightning war. The Versailles Treaty created Poland after World War I. Much of Hitler's career was made based upon German hatred for the treaty. All of Hitler's conquests in the late 1930s were done to erase the creations of Versailles in 1919. Most upsetting to Germans was the new nation of Poland, which was made out of land that had been German for hundreds of years. The new country also separated the German state of East Prussia from the rest of Germany. Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939. Britain and France declared war 2 days later, and World War II officially began. Poland was in an almost hopeless position from the start. Enemies surrounded them, and the Germans easily crushed the Polish border defenses and swept into the country. Germany practiced a new form of warfare which became known as Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Rather than a massive, slowly moving attack like those in World War I, Blitzkrieg emphasized speed and a crushing blow at the beginning of the battle. The Poles fought bravely and defended their nation at every turn, but were simply overwhelmed by the new German tactics. The Polish army was tough and proud and would have fared well in World War I. It was no longer 1918, though, and raw courage was not enough. Terror against civilians also became a German weapon. German dive bombers terrified refugees fleeing the battle by destroying roads, vehicles, and people at every opportunity. The Waffen SS made their combat debut too. The SS started as Hitler's personal bodyguard. In time, the SS began guarding the concentration camps that sprang up in Germany in the 1930s. Later on, the Waffen SS became the Nazi Party's own army. The Waffen SS went into battle alongside the regular German army and developed into a feared corps of soldiers who fought with fanatical loyalty to Hitler. They also gained a reputation for ruthless cruelty toward Polish civilians, Jews, prisoners, and anyone else the Nazis referred to as Untermenschen or subhuman. And there you see a photo of a German Stuka dive bomb. We're going to see those in a couple of different movies we're going to watch over the next few weeks. So you'll get to see a Stuka in action. When it was thought things could not get worse for the Poles, the Soviet Union invaded eastern Poland on September 17th. By October 6th, it was obvious that the British and the French, while having declared war, were not going to send help. The capital city of Warsaw surrendered. German and Soviet forces met and established a new border, and the nation of Poland ceased to exist, beginning a nightmarish 5 years under German occupation. The Phony War. When Germany invaded Poland, Britain and France declared war. They did not go to war happily. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain did everything possible to avoid conflict, including ignoring Czechoslovakia. The French reluctantly manned the Maginot Line and awaited a German strike into France. The British made plans to send their army to France to help. Then, for months after the surrender of Poland, almost nothing happened. The British referred to this time as the Phony War. The French called it drôle de guerre, or reluctant war. After the Blitzkrieg in Poland, the Germans joked that they were now in a Sitzkrieg, or sitting war. The alliance between France and Britain was in serious trouble, though. Each thought the other was not doing enough to help in the fight. The French army supplied most of the troops on the ground, while the British Royal Navy planned to bottle up Germany on the seas. The French army was not what it was in 1918, though. It was supposedly the best in the world. In fact, the French army was poorly led and trained. The supreme commander, Maurice Gamelin, spent most of his time on vacation instead of planning for the German attack. All were uneasy about a repeat of World War I. As it turned out, Germany was about to give them something far from that experience. So we see Britain and France, they've declared war, but their heart's not in it. They're not ready to fight. They're still hoping that somehow maybe this can all be worked out and they can just sort of avoid it. Even if they are committed to it, they're thinking like it's still World War I, and it's not. In the next article that we read, we're going to see when Germany, after they finished off Poland, they turned their attention towards the British and the French. And we see that the British and French don't fare any better, in fact, fare worse than the Polish army did. And that was shocking to the world. Nobody expected the Poles to really be able to hang on for too long, especially when they're surrounded by the Soviets and the Germans on each side. But when we look back on it, they fought pretty well. What we're going to see in our next article is really where the British and French kind of not being ready to fight really comes through, and the fall of France, basically in the same amount of time that it took Poland to fall, shocked the entire world. So we'll get to that, but this is the official start. Okay, so we'll see you.